friends. I'm your host, Dr. Dave Layton, and thank you for joining me in our journey to hope. It is my desire through this podcast to bring you information about how to discover, sustain, or perhaps regain hope. Today I have the opportunity to chat with Don Moore. Now, Don and I just recently met. He showed up at our doorstep here at the Prattville Church, and I was so glad to meet him. Don is the Assistant Executive Director for Lads to Leaders. Did I get that title right?
Yes.
Okay, good.
You did.
All right. So Don and I are going to discuss his thoughts on hope and how the Lads to Leaders organization helps folks in that discovering, sustaining, or regaining hope. Well, hello, Don.
Well, hello, Dave, and thank you for having me today. It was definitely great to meet you just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about Lads to Leaders and how it, the history of it and all of that. But
yeah.
Obviously, Lads to Leaders has been around a long time, and our congregation has been involved with it
for decades.
Yeah, as far as I've ever known. In fact, my children went through that program. So,
yes,
but before we get to talking about Lads to Leaders and about hope, let's talk about you for just a few minutes. Tell our audience about yourself.
Okay. Well, hopefully this will be brief.
Okay.
There's not much to tell. Married to my lovely bride Lisa. We have been married for 38 years.
Wonderful.
We met, we were junior high sweethearts.
Oh, awesome.
Yes, and we went to school together in a little town called Cove, Arkansas, which is over on the Oklahoma border side.
Now, I grew up in my high school years, junior high and high school years, in Elkins, Arkansas, which is right out of Fayetteville and Springdale area. In fact, I graduated from Springdale High. Now, where is Cove in relation to that?
So Cove would be about 150 miles due south.
Okay.
You know Highway 71?
Yeah, Highway 71 heading toward
goes down to Fort Smith and then on to Texarkana. Yes. So we grew up about 80 miles north of Texarkana.
Okay, now my wife grew up in that area, lived there for a while, kind of in Shreveport and that area through there.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we were almost neighbors. I'm sorry.
That's great.
So you grew up in Cove, Arkansas.
Grew up in Cove, Arkansas, yeah. So population was 379, and I like to say that's when all the dogs were home.
Elkins had 400.
Yeah, exactly. Small town. In fact, my brother and I, the church there were on a good Sunday, there were about 30 of us.
Okay.
And my brother and I, we were the youth group, and he was 4 years ahead of me.
If a family moved in with kids, you doubled the size of the youth group.
Definitely, yeah, definitely. So, so we were the youth group and just had a wonderful experience there. The beauty about a small congregation is, it's just really an extended family, and they took us under their wing and taught us how to lead singing, taught us how to, lead public prayers, serve on the table, give a talk and stuff like that. So it was a great experience there, and a lot of people might not enjoy small congregations, but I think, and I get a chance to see a lot of them in my role.
Oh yes,
of all sizes,
and there's like any congregation, there's pluses and minuses.
Exactly, and so that I like to focus on the plus, and that was definitely a plus. In fact, my brother went on; he went to Harding, became a preacher, served as a preacher and an elder for a while. I went to college, served as a volunteer youth minister at the Liberty Church of Christ in Valonia, Arkansas. And then we went on, and my wife and I both went through ROTC. So we married, we went to college, we both went through ROTC. She was an Army nurse. I became an Army infantry officer. Went off, I had a career. She did one she met her service obligation, and then she wanted to get out because we had a son and a daughter on the way. And
well,
so
and you know, my wife's civilian, but that's kind of funny to say that, civilian. She was as much involved with the military as I was.
Yeah.
But anyway, when both of you are military, you know, the chances of deployments and separately. So yeah, there's a lot of issues there. I understand her looking at that, saying, no, that's.
Yeah. You know, my first assignment was at Fort Hood, Texas, and so she was at the hospital there.
Yeah.
And you know, we had to have the family care plan and all that stuff in case we were all both deployed and all that. We just didn't think that was a great way to continue.
Yeah.
So she got out and raised kids, and then eventually she didn't want to give up her nursing career, so we were able to find, based off the assignment, she was able to work on weekends and stuff like that, you know, part-time basis to keep her skills up and everything. Yeah. So graduated college, had the Army career, moved more than some, less than others. You know, ended up went from Fort Hood, Texas to Fort Huachuca, Arizona, where I was retrained as a military intelligence officer. You know, the great oxymoron, right? Military intelligence. And went on from there to serve Fort Riley, Kansas, then went to Germany for 5 years, loved it. Went to Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. I like to say on the outside, not the inside. And
that's right.
went to some additional schooling there, and then we're finally stationed at Fort Carson, Colorado. I had 1 month to get the family settled, and then I was deploying to Iraq for the first time.
Oh boy!
So we did that, and then fortunately, when I got back from there, I was able to continue to serve there at Fort Carson. And then the opportunity came up to go to Peterson Air Force Base, which is also in Colorado Springs. And so it cost another year in Iraq to do that, but I was able to keep the family stable at least, you know, for 7 years.
Yeah, wow.
7 years there, which I consider fortunate that we were able to do that. Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of positive things about that stability factor. Your children, for example, are in a school system and not have to be disruptive and friends and all that.
Yeah. So we've got a son who's a photojournalist in Phoenix, Arizona, burning up there right now with the heat. And then our daughter lives in Los Angeles, and she has been a English teacher, high school English teacher for a charter school out there for a few years. She likes Los Angeles. I can't. It's not for us, but you know, she enjoys it out there, and it's hard to argue about the weather out there a lot. So you know, I understand it, I guess. But do miss our kids being here in Montgomery.
I share that with you. My daughter lives out in the Seattle area, and then a couple other ones live over in the Richmond, Virginia area.
So you got both coasts.
Yeah, we do have one daughter that lives up around Memphis. We get to see the grandchildren, but I understand that distance thing is no fun.
No, not at all. Not at all. So we lived in Colorado for 17 years, including the 7 years I was, you know, in the service, and then we continued to live there for 10 more years. So I retired from the Army. My wife was working at a local hospital there full time. She ended up in management there, and I ended up working for a national used car retailer in management. So we did that for 10 years. Worshipped at the Castle Rock Church of Christ, which is just south of Denver, and you know, so between Denver and Colorado Springs there.
Is your wife still active as a nurse?
She is, but she's not working in a hospital right now. Like, she still has her license and everything, but actually now she works from home. She has the opportunity to work from home, and she's a medical coder. So, I know several nurses that I've known have gone into, I don't know the proper term, mobile nursing, where, you know, their own travel nursing.
Travel nursing.
Yes.
In fact, when I was going through cancer treatment, one of my nurses was that, and she traveled around. Her specialty was oncology, and great person. I was thrilled to have her.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry. So, okay. So,
Yeah. And we looked at that, but I knew I would be traveling a lot.
Yeah.
And so, and she enjoys what she's doing now. She's on her own schedule, basically.
Okay.
And so it works out great for us.
So what got you interested in Lads to Leaders? Before we start talking about Lads to Leaders,
well, I had mentioned, back in during my Army career, well, actually before that, when we were in college, I was that volunteer youth minister in Liberty Church of Christ in Bologna, Arkansas, and I really enjoyed that. So I saw a need. So they had a good group of teens, and I saw a need that they didn't have a youth minister.
Yeah.
They weren't going to be able to afford to pay for a youth minister,
Right.
but I knew I needed to serve in the church.
Yeah.
And so my wife and I, we talked about it, and we volunteered our services, and we did that for 2 years.
Okay.
And just loved it. Loved working with the teens. Helped build some cohesion there within the church and everything, and then the Army career kicked off. So about halfway through the Army career, we end up at Fort Leavenworth.
Okay.
And there was at the Leavenworth Church of Christ again. There was this small but nice group of teens, a youth group, and so they asked me to serve as the youth deacon.
Okay.
And I definitely agreed to do that.
A very important role, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, it's up to parents as we train our children and all of that and teach them, but it's nice having that person who can interact with them at their level and encourage them and teach them. Especially the teens, we went through it as teenagers where mom and dad didn't know anything, but somebody from the outside could come in and they have all the answers and we're
Right.
going to follow them. So, okay.
Yeah, a lot of truth to my parents don't know anything until I get older, and then they know everything. Yeah.
And I like what you're saying about that you looked there and you saw the need and you said, we're going to step up. I tell people, especially working with people about hope, I tell them, look, one of the best things you can do to discover, sustain, or regain hope is to get out of yourself and start working where other folks have a need, and you help fulfill that need. Get out of yourself, and you can say, well, I don't know how to do something, or what do I know? What do I have? Our Lord asked Moses the question, what's in your hands? Right. And as we would say in Alabama and probably in Arkansas, Moses looked down and said, I got this stick.
Right.
and so, you and your wife looked at it and said, well, we can do this. And so you use what you had. Your management skills, your experiences in the military, and mine as well. We just transfer that over. You start using it for the Lord.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Well, we're off the subject a little bit. I'm sorry. Go ahead and finish talking about yourself.
No, that's fine. After a couple of years at Leavenworth, I ended up at Fort Carson, and then after a few years there, like I said, we started worshiping at the Castle Rock Church of Christ.
Yeah.
And again, I recognized a need, and so a good friend of mine is the preacher there, Matthew Marine. And so he had a mutual relationship with Greg Tidwell, who serves on the board of Lads to Leaders, and was the editor for Gospel Advocate.
Yes, I knew that name when you said it. That's right. Yes.
So he put Matthew in touch with the executive director for Lads to Leaders, Roy Johnson. And so Roy reaches out to me and says, hey, I hear you would like to do something out there. We would love to expand Lads to Leaders out west.
Oh, yeah.
And so through, conversations and visits and everything, he came out in 2017, and we recruited some local congregations to help us get it started along with Castle Rock. And in 2018, we held our first convention at the Castle Rock building, and then from there, we've been in some facilities ever since. Now, I don't want to paint too big of a picture. Because it's what we call a small convention, you know.
Yeah,
on Easter weekend, there's
a gathering.
yes. On Easter weekend, you know, we've got our big six at all the different locations: Nashville, Orlando, you know, Atlanta, and so forth. But it was great to have something like that out in Colorado. So
yeah, now it's a challenging area.
Well, it is. Yeah, it is.
Challenging in the sense that the churches that are out there are usually small congregations and scattered out and all that. We've discovered that as sojourners. There's just such a great need out there.
There is, and they're a lot of times they're hungry for something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, they are, absolutely. And not just for the children, but especially for the children, but even in the adult world.
Right, for everybody. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And so Lads to Leaders kind of provides kind of a unifying effect out there.
Yes, it does.
Amongst several congregations who are familiar with each other, get along with each other, but didn't necessarily do much together. So I like to think that Lads to Leaders being out there helps build that unity and that cohesion among the various congregations who are involved with it.
I want to jump ahead just a little bit. Sure, I know we've kind of wandered off the storyline of you a little bit, but we've used the expression Lads to Leaders several times. So let's just take a few minutes and inject here. What is Lads to Leaders?
Sure.
There could be folks listening and they're going, well, that sounds great. What is that?
Yeah. Lads to Leaders, or we'll shorten that to L2L because we find L2L is easier to put an email or text. But technically the name is Lads to Leaders and Leaderettes.
And Leaderettes.
Yes.
Yeah, because we've got our young ladies involved. Absolutely.
We do now. It started in 1968 with the late Dr. Jack Zorn at the Warner Robins congregation. And so it starts like, in my opinion, many great things start. The elders at the Warner Robins congregation recognized a need. And so what did they do? They called a meeting to talk about the need. And then what did they do? Well, they do like many good elderships do. They called in the preacher and asked to talk to the preacher, brought the preacher in. And so...
well, first of all, it's biblical. We are supposed to be teaching our children. I mean, that's our role as fathers.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm passionate about that. Paul talks about it in Ephesians 5, our role as spiritual leaders in our family, and that's something we cannot abdicate to someone else. We have got to, as dads, step up in that role. And so Lads to Leaders is a resource to help us dads. So I didn't mean to take that away from you, but go ahead. They called a meeting, called a preacher together. What
they did, and they asked him, they said, we need your help with this. There's some things that you're doing now that we're going to give to somebody else to free you up to do this. And so Dr. Zorn went, and he actually spent a week in prayer and fasting in the basement of a house. And when he came out, he basically had, the seed for what is now known as Lads to Leaders. So there were 8 young men there at that congregation that he took under his wing. He taught them how to do public speaking and involved them in other activities within the church. And from that humble beginning of 8 young men, now there have been over 300,000 people of all ages involved with Lads to Leaders that have grown spiritually because of it. And, it is impossible to number how many preachers and deacons and elders and Bible class teachers and just other, strong families that have resulted from being involved with Lads to Leaders.
Our congregation is involved in not just the season of preparing our children for the Lads to Leaders events, but it's year-round. We incorporate our young men and young ladies as appropriate, of course. It's a culture within our congregation. It's not just a program.
And the congregations that adopt that approach of a year-round focus are the ones that, from our experience, see really the most growth. They see the most fruit of the labor, if you will, when they do that. And there is something for everyone in Lads to Leaders. We like to say for everybody from 3 to 103. And you know what? We will make an exception if you're 104. We'll let you, be involved too.
Programs. And you can consider Lads to Leaders a program if you want to, but programs seem to have a built-in shelf life. We do it for a while and then that's it. There's that natural growth, biological curve,
Sure.
But when it becomes the culture, now it's who we are, it's part of our identity, and we sustain it. And so that's my philosophy on it anyway. So.
No, absolutely.
And we have our own leadership in the congregation for it, and our elders are behind it. So you talk about, I mean, we've seen young men go off and become preachers. We've seen our young ladies grow up to be incredible wives of good and leaders in their way within congregations, helping others grow, especially as teachers and wonderful spouses. So, okay, sorry. So Jack Zorn, I knew Jack. We all knew Jack. We would see him frequently. One of my fondest memories of Jack, he came in one night, Sunday evening, to preach, and he goes up on the stage, and he's got on sandals and white socks. And which was great. It was just kind of interesting seeing him that way. And somebody said something to him later on, just kidding, not picking on him, but just kidding a little bit about wearing sandals to church. And he looked over at him and says, well, our Lord wore sandals. That stopped that discussion immediately.
Sure. And that sounds like something that...
Why aren't you wearing sandals?
Right. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
You mentioned shelf life. That's one of the great things, really, that I think about Lads to Leaders. Is I think of it in different terms than from a program. I think of it as an intergenerational ministry. And if a congregation adopts that approach of an intergenerational ministry, I mean, it can have just really some unifying effects within the congregation. Why? And because it helps provide structure. It helps provide goals. And we're not talking about taking over what happens in the local congregation. That's one of the other things that we emphasize is we're not here to tell you how to do things. We're here to provide you some tools. For you to, as in Ephesians 4 states, equip the saints, for the building up of the body. And so that's what we try to emphasize, and I think that's what the year-round stuff, our year-round events and curriculum and those things, I think those really help with that. Take the spiritual disciplines, for instance. Just last fall we came out with Teach Me to Pray. It's got 7 lessons on prayer, put together by 3 of our board members, one of them Dr. Phil Sanders from In Search of the Lord's Way. And then there's a prayer journal there, a 30-day prayer journal, and you go through the lessons, you do the prayer journal, and what that does then is that builds, if you don't have it already, it helps instill that spiritual discipline of prayer, which is, just one of many disciplines that are so crucial.
We all need to grow in those areas, especially in prayer. Absolutely.
And the other thing that we're always trying to do is we're looking at ways to, remain relevant. You hear that term a lot, remain relevant. We just came out with Wilderness Challenge that just showed up at the office this week. We had it available for pre-order, but the idea behind that is to provide both practical and spiritual lessons to get the kids outside, but also using some of the skills that they are hopefully already learning within Lads to Leaders. So how great is it to do the campfire devotional, or at least singing around the campfire?
I like the fact that, I like what you just said about spiritual and practical. You and I know there's no separation of that in our lives, but not everybody understands that. And I talk about that in this podcast about hope. I try to provide that balance of spiritual and, I say secular, but practical, because not everybody is there spiritually, but they need some help right now. And so that we need to have that balance. And it's great because, once again, learning is multidimensional. And I mean by that, you're learning one thing, but at the same time, you're learning some other things. And so the young people are seeing there is an application within the spiritual realm of what I have learned, if you want to use the expression outside of the spiritual realm. You learn leadership and management. We in the military, that's one of the things we learn, especially as we move up in our positions. And so the mindset is great. I'm so happy to have this. How can I use this for the Lord?
Exactly.
So that's where you take them, and I love that.
Yeah.
Man, we are so far off the subject.
Oh, sorry.
So Lads and Leaders is a program that offers the spiritual growth opportunities and knowledge and training, experiential learning, all of that for young people, young boys, young ladies. So that's a great thing. Let me get back on track a little bit about you. And again, the way my brain works, we bounce around a little bit.
Oh, that's
How did you get... Okay, somebody had to approach you and said, Don, have I got a deal for you?
As far as
being the executive director.
The assistant.
I'm sorry, assistant.
I want to.
Okay.
Let me just say there is
assistant executive director.
Yes, sir. Yeah. And I don't put much emphasis on the executive. It's
I don't know what your military experience in this area was, but I found out in my career, the longer your title, the least important you were. You had commander, and then you had, I had a sign outside my office that said non-commissioned officer in charge of silly little jobs. Otherwise known as the first sergeant.
Right, yeah. Well, to put it in that framework, a lot of times I view myself as kind of like an executive officer.
Okay,
so,
sure.
With Roy being the commander, he is the executive director. And there's no one like Roy.
And of course, the ultimate person in charge with the most responsibility has that singular title of secretary.
So true.
I learned early on if I wanted to see the commander, I had to be really friendly with the secretary, and she had to allow me to see. She was the gatekeeper.
It helps in the church world.
Oh, it does. It does. We love our office administration. Anyway, I'm sorry. We are way off.
It's good. So, we started Leaders to Leaders out there in Colorado. As a volunteer.
Okay.
Then they asked me if I'd like to serve on the board.
Okay.
And so I became involved with the board. I started to help out at other conventions because the Colorado convention's at a different time. It's not on Easter weekend like the big conventions are. In fact, we've got 4 conventions that are not on Easter weekend.
It's really grown.
It has, and so I would help out with most of the time in Dallas Fort Worth with running that convention, and then. Things happened in our lives. We were looking for a change in Colorado. I was serving as an elder at Castle Rock. I had my job there, and was also working quite a bit from a volunteer basis for Lads to Leaders. And so we knew some things needed to change. My wife was in management in the hospital, and that was really consuming her.
Yeah.
And we recognized that in the long run, it was not going to be healthy.
Okay.
And then, honestly, I think God just provided an opportunity. And Roy mentioned, he asked me if I'd be interested in working here at the office in Montgomery and for Lads to Leaders, and just kind of everything came together. And
well, how long have you been in the role now as assistant?
So 19 months.
Okay, great.
Here. Yeah, January of 23 is when I started. And still a steep learning curve, really steep.
Sure.
Of course, I'm working with folks that have been there for many more years than I have, and so it's just a matter of gaining some more institutional knowledge as we continue to.
And now, what do you do as the assistant director?
Whatever the executive director doesn't want to do.
That's the answer.
No, I tease a lot about
some of those
that.
Silly little jobs.
Right.
No, they're all important. That's for sure. Okay.
So we're a small staff. There's 6 of us that are at the office, and so we all get a chance to pitch in certain areas. And that's what we do, whether it be, convention preparation, whether it be talking with coordinators, group leaders, visiting congregations. We run the gamut.
And that's important, because it really would be more than a person could handle. The variations in the focuses and all of these things. So it's good. It lets you bring your strength in.
Yes, absolutely.
One author I read in leadership, none of us are as smart as all of us.
Yes.
There's things we would overlook. Or
I'm a firm believer. I'm a firm believer in that. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. So as the assistant executive director, you have lots of side things you have to take care of, and be a part of that. Okay. Before we get to talking about hope, one other question I have about Lads to Leaders is, how can someone become involved in Lads to Leaders, or start up a program in their congregation of Lads to Leaders?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we have a lot of folks, that will hear about us word of mouth and reach out to us. In fact, that's where a lot of our growth comes from, is those that are participating in Lads to Leaders and using the tools that Lads to Leaders provides. Then they see the benefit from it, and so they share that with others, and others reach out to us.
I mentioned that learning is multidimensional. So here I am as a parent in a congregation. I have my children involved in Lads to Leaders, and I'm working with that. But as that parent, I'm learning also.
Yes.
Can't help but, if I'm paying attention.
Yes.
So, that's a critical point.
I mean, how powerful is it when, one of the things that we like to emphasize, another one of the spiritual disciplines, it falls under the umbrella of read the Word in the rule book.
Sure.
But it's reading through the New Testament or the Old Testament or the entire Bible through the course of a year, or maybe listening to it while you're on your commute.
And as I'm within my congregation, if I'm responsible for a particular area within the Lads to Leaders program, I'm learning at the same time. Can't help but.
Helping the kids get ready for Bible Bowl and stuff like that.
Bible Bowl, or I'm helping them with their public speaking, or their song leading, or scripture reading, all these other things.
All those things, absolutely, Okay. And I just think it's powerful when the adults within the family, and then adults outside the family are involved with it. It's just going to help build that faith. It's going to help with the spiritual growth of everyone involved, and in particular, when you're looking at it from a hope aspect, our kids.
You said about, we don't know how many young people have become preachers, but we don't know how many young people have become leaders within the congregation, both designated as either a deacon or an elder, but also ministry leaders. There's so many people that are involved with programs or activities of the congregation that go back and say, I had a foundation within Lads to Leaders that helped me grow both in knowledge and skill, but also confidence and things like that. Okay. So someone can contact you guys?
Absolutely. They can. They're more than welcome to call us at the office. I mentioned we're a small staff. There are times when no one's in the office, but if they'll leave a message, we'll definitely get back to them. But also, if they call office, we'll answer the phone. They can go to our website, which I would recommend to check out.
That website is?
That is Lads, the number 2, leaders.com.
Okay, so they can contact the Lads to Leaders organization and find out.
Yeah, or quite frankly, they can. I'm pretty sure Roy's cell number's even on our website too, and they're welcome to call me as well.
Okay, and then is there a Facebook location?
We do have we have a very strong Facebook presence. Okay. It's gotten even stronger over the past couple of years.
Okay. You might think about starting a podcast. Easy to do.
Well, I know someone that knows how to get those going.
I'll help you with that. All right.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So we can contact Lads to Leaders if we're interested in becoming involved and or starting a program within our congregation.
Yeah, and we'd love to talk to you about it. What we'll do is we'll come and do what we call a presentation or a workshop.
Good.
to
So you're
explain
gonna,
it.
Yeah, you're going to provide that professional support. Because some people might say, well, it's pretty big. We want to do it, but where do I start?
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, great. Well, again, the theme of my podcast on hope is helping someone discover, sustain, or regain hope. And I want to know a couple of things as we kind of transition into that, is some of your thoughts about hope, and then kind of like to go into, so how does Lads to Leaders help in that area? So let's talk about that. What are your thoughts on hope?
Sure. When you mentioned what your podcast was about, immediately what came to mind was actually Hebrews 11 and verse 1.
Okay. Oh, I love it. Yeah.
Now, Hebrews 11:1, really the subject is faith.
Yes. It introduces faith, but I love it. Go for it, brother.
But it talks about faith is the substance of things hoped for.
Yeah, and the assurance of things not seen.
Exactly.
I love that verse because, yes, he's transitioning into this group of people that exhibited faith, grew in faith. But there's hope, and it's sandwiched between some really strong words. I'm so glad you brought that up. I love that verse talking about hope. Yes, sir. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. So, I got to think, well, what do we hope for?
Yeah.
And really, keeping with the subject of the podcast, what do we hope maybe that Lads to Leaders might do for us? And one of the things we hope for is a better future for ourselves, for our families, for the church, for our country. And one of the things, it's not the only thing, but one of the primary components to bring about or put that hope into practice, to provide substance for that hope, and provide that evidence that we're looking for, is leadership. It has to be there in all of those dimensions, all of those parts of our lives. We've had people go through Lads to Leaders that they didn't necessarily become a preacher, but they became leaders within their organizations, other companies, or something like that.
Yeah. Well, this goes way beyond just something that happens at church on regular meeting times. No. You talk about we talked about building a culture within the congregation, but the spinoff of that culture is it moves out into the world's culture, where we're supposed to go.
Ideally, yes. Yes, and the world is standing out there and pushing back on us.
In desperate need of what we can offer them.
It is. It's in desperate need of what we can offer. Wow. So when I think about, when I think about hope and I tie it to Lads to Leaders, that's really, those are really the areas that I think about.
I talk about in the podcast and in the book I wrote about hope, I talk about how there's two general views of hope. There's this nebulous, I hope something will happen or hope something doesn't happen. And there's nothing wrong with that. We use that all the time. I hope it rains, I hope it doesn't rain, or whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
But then there's the Hebrews 11:1. It's sandwiched between assurance and confident, those words. And so hope is that confident assurance. It's that idea that it's something that's not nebulous. It's something that's very concrete, and we grow in that hope. The closer we are in that relationship with our Lord, starts with that relationship with our Lord and grows from there. But it's something that I know. It's not something I suppose or might be. It's something I know. I have that confidence in it.
Right.
If nothing else, it's confidence in the promise of God, who is absolutely faithful to his promises to us. So didn't mean to get to preaching there, brother.
No, it's good.
That's that understanding of hope that the world desperately needs, something they can hold on to.
Yeah, it is. And one of the, we get a chance to visit a lot of congregations. And one of the sad things is invariably in just about every congregation, there will be a parent or a grandparent that'll come to us and tell us that their that one, they wish they had known about Lads to Leaders, and two, that their kids are no longer faithful.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And, talk about something that can crush your hope.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that fuels a lot of what we do within Lads to Leaders, because we don't want parents and grandparents to experience that. Mm-hmm. And we see anecdotally, as well as, prior to COVID, there was a survey done of congregations that had been involved with Lads to Leaders for a long time. And the results of that showed that on average about 85% of the kids who were involved in that for multiple years stayed faithful. I was just at a congregation this week that was hosted down in Montgomery, hosting a gospel meeting. And they have done Lads to Leaders, and I just showed up for the gospel meeting, but they noticed I had a Lads to Leaders pin, and they wanted to come up and tell me all the great things that have come out of that congregation because of that. They were telling me about their kids who maybe were doctors and lawyers and engineers, but were still faithful.
Yeah.
And they gave some credit to the tools that we provide through Lads to Leaders.
And what's at the heart of that, I've discovered, not empirical research and all of that, but things that I've observed, is that when someone is converted to Christ and grows in that relationship to Christ, they'll stay faithful. If they are involved in a group or a program, that may lose its shine and they move away from that group or program. But when you grow in that faith of our Lord and that conviction in our Lord, you're converted to the Lord. That's the idea of making disciples. Not of me, not of the church, of the Lord.
It is, yeah. And that reminds me, like, we have a relative, it's a relatively new, been about I don't know, around 3 years, but we even have some curriculum associated with that. It's called SOAR.
Okay.
Again, produced by Dr. Phil Sanders from Search of the Lord's Way, and one of our board members, and he took decades of his experience of evangelism and put it into this. And it's great for people to use as a study. So they study and then they apply, study, apply until they work through it. There was one young lady that came up to us. We were at, I think it was at the Freed Hardeman lectures. We have a table there, and she came up to us and was excited. She had been participating or she was working towards her red coat, which is another discussion. But one of the things that she needed to complete for that was this SOAR evangelism training. And so she asked her grandmother to do it with her. And so she went through all the lessons with Grandma, and when they got done, she said, "Thank you, Grandma." Yeah, what grandma's not going to help her granddaughter, right?
Right.
But she went through it and said, "Thank you, Grandma, for helping me complete this. This will go towards helping me earn my red coat." And Grandma said, "Well, you're not done yet." And the young lady said, "What do you mean I'm not done?" And see, Grandma wasn't a Christian yet. And Grandma said, I need to be a Christian. I need to be baptized and become a Christian.
Wow.
So I think that's just one example of what it is that you're talking about, through conversion, discipleship.
So Lads to Leaders helps with this discovery, sustaining, and regaining of hope. You provide clarity. You provide purpose. You provide a lot of resources and support. And so that's just important. Again, that's building that foundation so that we can grow closer to the Lord and move into that. By the way, the dynamics of Lads to Leaders within a congregation, it takes on a very robust life. The more of our members that are involved, we get to see our young people, if I can use the word perform, I'm not sure that's the best word, but we get to see them practicing.
And demonstrating.
Before they go to the convention, they will go through a series of where the young men are leading the congregation in worship, and the young ladies are meeting with our ladies and doing their presentations, all of that. So that's a real good thing.
And, you bring up a good point. One of the things that we will get asked about at times is feedback at convention.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
But it's our belief that the feedback is more effective, and it is best if it's coming from people that those young people already have a relationship with.
Yes.
And they have some trust with. And so that's again the beauty of the year. If they're doing these things year round, or like what you said, they're having an opportunity to practice before going to convention. What a wonderful time to provide some feedback. I was at a congregation. They were doing this on a Wednesday night. Had some young men doing song leading and some young men who were given their devotional talks, their speeches. And then after each one, solicited feedback from the congregation. And one, it was very positively received within the congregation. Two, it was very positively received by those young men as well. Encouraging. It was so encouraging to do that. And so that's why we think that is something that best comes from home, if you will, from the home congregation.
Well, we could go on this for a long time, because there's just so much that
there is, to
the Leaders and Leaders. But let me wrap up a little bit.
Okay, sure.
Well, thank you, Don, for being a guest on the podcast, sharing your idea of hope with others. Thank you for your role in Leaders and Leaders. It's going to have. You use the expression generational impact. Absolutely. And that's what we want. And we're helping folks focus on the Lord. So thank you for that. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here. I'm really glad I met you.
I'd like to have you back sometime.
All right. Sounds good.
Well, friends, thank you for joining me as together we journey to hope. I trust in some small way we have encouraged you to discover, sustain, or regain hope through this effort. I invite you to contact me if you have any questions or comments, or if you wish to share with me something you've experienced in your journey to hope. My email is info@ourjourneytohope.com. That's info@ourjourneytohope.com. And please share this podcast with someone whose hope is being challenged. I look forward to sharing more with you soon. Again, I'm Dr. Dave Layton, and thank you for listening. And until our next episode, remember, we give all glory to God our Father.